Good evening, everyone. I imagine there may be people coming in still, but I'm going to make a start so I can introduce our speaker for this evening. Can everyone hear me all right? Great. So, good evening and welcome to the very first of our special series of Frank Davies lectures organised in celebration of Claudette Johnson's beautiful exhibition currently on at the Courtauld Gallery, Claudette Johnson Presents. The series, which we've called Black British Art, Histories, Presents, Futures, has been organised collaboratively between my wonderful research student Michelle Zhu, thank you Michelle, the Courtauld Research Forum team, thank you to them, and our Vice Dean of Research, Dr. Lucy Bradnock, thank you to her as well, and myself. And I'd like to extend warm thanks to all of them, and in particular to Michelle. But it's my great pleasure this evening to welcome the first speaker in our series, Dr. Sylvia Thury. Dr. Thury is an art educator, researcher, and independent curator. She's currently also lecturer in contextual fine art and photography at the University of Wolverhampton. She co-curated the More Things Change at Wolverhampton Art Gallery earlier this year, a major exhibition exploring the work of the Black Art Group, who were active from 1979 to 1984, as well as focusing on the evolving practices of the individual artists from 1985 to the present. Sylvia was also research lead for the Runnymede Trust's Visualise Race Inclusion in Art Education project, commissioned by the Freelance Foundation between August 2021 and January 2022. In 2019 to 2020, she was curator in residence at the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum, working in partnership with New Art West Midlands, International Curators Forum and Coventry Biennial. Her residency culminated in the exhibition 13 Ways of Looking at the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum, which ran from October to December 2020. Dr. Thury's recent publications include From Institutional Racism to Duties of Care, Moving Interventionist Practices Away from Racism and Colonial Dominance, commissioned by the University of Arts London's Decolonising Arts Institute and the Contemporary Art Society in 2022, and Who Belongs in Art School in Kate Macmillan's Representation of Women Artists in Britain report during 2020, published by the Freelance Foundation in 2021. And Sylvia is also part of the advisory group for the brilliant ICF, the International Curators Forum. But with no further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome her today with a talk entitled This Body Wants What It Wants, Claudette Johnson and the Female Form. And Sylvia will talk for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a few minutes for Q&A, and then we can continue the discussion in the Research Forum seminar room afterwards where drinks will be served. So thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you for that welcome, Dodd, and also thank you for inviting me to speak this evening. I'm delighted to be here and excited to share this lecture with you all. So this is currently a working paper that I'm developing, so I really welcome people's thoughts and feedback. Belinda Zhawi's poem, This Body Wants What It Wants, is taken as a starting point of a discussion around Claudette Johnson's work and her treatment of the body, and more specifically the female form. Both Zhawi and Johnson's creative practices expand our understandings of the body, what it means, what it does, where it goes, and what it feels. Placing Johnson's work in dialogue with Zhawi's poem, this lecture seeks to open up wider conversations around the ways Johnson centers Black women's bodies through her use of scale, media, colour, and texture. Johnson's larger-than-life studies refuse the limited perspectives historically projected onto the female form and instead offer the viewer depictions of Black women's bodies with agency, portrayals of bodies experiencing pain, pleasure, and leisure, among other things. Alongside poetry, this lecture also encourages an engagement with the work of Johnson and the female form through sound, ascertaining that Johnson's artworks exceed their physical forms. The lecture draws on Saidiya Hartman's notions on writing back to historical silences through critical theory and creative writing, and Tina Camp's ideas around listening to images. where Kant asks us not just to look, but to listen well to images. And so within this lecture, I will be focusing specifically on two of Claudette Johnson's artworks that you can see here, I Came to Dance from 1983 and Blues Dance from 2023. And what I'm really interested in is the interdisciplinary nature of literature, in particular poetry, music, sound and art, and how they all speak to, for and with each other. And for the topic of this lecture, Claudette's work, which we know that poetry has informed some of her works. I'm thinking of artworks like And I Have My Own Business in the Skin, for which the title for that artwork was taken from the last line of a poem by poet Gail Murray. And the influence of music and sound is also particularly apparent in Johnson's practice. The title of Johnson's 2019 solo show at the Modern Art Oxford was I Came to Dance, after her work, which you see here from 1983. And in the catalogue for the Modern Art Oxford exhibition, Johnson talks about the work I Came to Dance coming from a song which made her think about the role of dance in African Caribbean culture as a bittersweet history with its links to ancient African culture, slavery, the Caribbean and contemporary Afro-Caribbean society. She was also interested through her work with unpacking the ideas around dance being seen both as a destructive stereotype and also as a source of pleasure and self-expression. The influence of dance and music has continued with Johnson's new work, which we can see on the other side, Blues Dance, made especially for her current exhibition at the Courtauld, is titled, as I've said, Blue Dance. The title 1980. To sound, which Johnson has stated she has an interest in, and also thinking about how rhythm and movement and sound come through in her work. In I Came to Dance and Blues Dance, there are conversations to be had about the way Johnson depicts music and sound as felt in and through the body. I'm interested in thinking about this in relation to the qualities of the artworks, their scale, their colours, textures, the use of marks on the paper, the use of line and pattern. I'm also interested in thinking about this in relation to how the work makes someone feel, what memories they trigger, what messages they communicate, and ultimately how it causes the viewer to engage in the transformative power of art. Educator, writer, Black feminist theorist Bell Hooks talks about this, particularly the power of art to convert and to transform, to expand our consciousness and our ability to create and nurture our spirits. And similarly, Black feminist theorist of visual culture and contemporary art, Tina Kant, also draws on similar ideas in relation to the listening practice that she has developed over the years. A practice that asks, particularly in relation to photographs, is how do we listen to images? In Kant's book, Listening to Images, she asks the reader to think about a series of questions when looking at images. What is the sound that precedes the image? Kant asks people to think about this idea of visual contact. What can you see? To think about physical contact. What can you touch? To think about psychic contact. What can you feel? And to think about sonic contact. What can you hear as you view the image? All these questions lead us to a place where we can allow ourselves to be transformed by art, to engage our senses, sight, hearing, touch, actually attuning our whole bodies to the art we are engaging in. And I ask that we think about these questions in relation to Johnson's work. And so at this point of the talk, I would like to think about the idea of preparing the ground. In visual arts, the ground, sometimes known as the primer, is a prepared surface that covers the support of the picture, as in the canvas, and it underlies the actual painting. It's an undercoat that can then be covered entirely or left visible in the final work. and it gives the artist an even ground to work on. Drawing on Tina Camp's ideas around listening well to images and the connection of music and sound, particularly if we think of music as organised sound, in Johnson's work it feels necessary to prepare the ground for this lecture with some important sounds that I think resonate with the wider themes of this lecture. Sounds that the poet and sound artist Belinda Zhawi, so it sounds from the poet and sound artist Belinda Zhawi, sounds from the artist Amy Bailey, and lastly, the sound of myself reading one of Zhawi's poems, which is called This Body Wants What It Wants, which is also the title of the lecture. The first sound that I'm going to play is called Flame Lily. Flame Lily is a piece by Belinda Zhawi, who also goes by the stage name Ma Moyo, and works as a poet and a sound artist. So Belinda Zhawi / Ma Moyo offers a captivating fusion of poetry, music and performance, where voice, percussion and sound intertwine to delve into ideas around borders, movement and Afro-diasporic research and narratives. In this sound piece, you will hear Ma Moyo talking about lineage. You'll hear her paying tribute to women who have come before, who shaped and molded her. It's a performance that centers feminine power. It talks of the women we descend from and how their hard work allows us to move through the world with more ease than before. It reminds me of the ways Johnson has paid tribute to Black women as they have historically been the focus of her practice.
For our first performance, give it up, Ma Moyo and Maria Oki.
So the first poem we're going to do is called Flame Lily, and it's about lineage and women I come from, women we come from. So yeah. I come from them, those flame lilies that grew despite the darkness of deep waters. These women of the cloth, these women of God, will cradle their faith close to their chests with heavy but sturdy arms. I come from them, those flame lilies that grew despite the darkness of deep waters. These women who love with no pause but plenty caution. These flame lilies. I come from these women of love with no men around. These women who sit me under clear skies and tell me when they were girls too. These flame lilies. These flame lilies that grew in the dark. Grew in the dark. I come from these women who never cried to save face, women of no affection. I come from these women of prayer, stifled tears and bruised knees, the flame lilies that grew. I come from these women, these Madonnas of light and dark, these saints, these sinners of light and dark, bruised knees and stifled tears. I come from these women, flame lilies that grew despite the darkness of the waters. This flame lily Shona, my Nebele, my Nana, my Bella, my Roji, Kara. I come from the women that birth the sun. I come from the sand. I come from the sun and the flame sun, flame,
And the second sound that I would like us to think about to frame the conversation today is Pitch Sisters by artist Embodied. The Pitch Sisters was a sound installation presented as part of Sounds Like Her, a touring exhibition curated by Christine Iron and commissioned by the New Art Exchange in Nottingham. With this work, Bailey presents what a female sonic universe would sound like if women's voices hung around an A-flat below middle C. Bailey recorded the voices of 46 women performing their aforementioned note, creating an immersive environment to contemplate the rich tapestry of women's voices. This is a complex work that I think requires more time to unpack than we have time for today, but I am particularly drawn to Bailey's exploration of the physicality of sound and how it is felt in the body through the installation that happened in Nottingham. Pitch Sisters has been described as an immersive sound piece which vibrating intensity is set to permeate from the speaker's circular installations to the visitor's own body. And it is this exploration of the physicality of sound, considering how sound is felt in the body, what it does to the body, what responses it provokes in the body, that resonates for me in thinking about Claudette Johnson's artworks, I Came to Dance and Blues Dance. Tina Camp talks about sound as an inherently embodied process that registers at multiple levels of the human sensorium, arguing that it is possible through sound to engage with forgotten histories that images can transmit, and particularly in thinking about blues dance, which evokes memories of the 1980s music scene, and through that artwork we're almost transported back to that time. So I'm going to play Bailey's Pitch Sisters, and just to sort of make clear that we're not obviously hearing it in the way that it would have been intended, but hopefully to give you a sense of what the work was doing. And then the third sound is myself reading Belinda Zhawi's poem, This Body Wants What It Wants. And again, when I first came across this poem, it really reminded me of the two artworks that I'm talking about this evening. And also just thinking about this idea of like sound and rhythm being such a large part of poetry, and then coupled with the fact that this poem is all about the body, Black women's bodies and their experiences and the importance of their agency and autonomy. This body wants to play, play. This body wants to play. This body wants sun. This body is real. This body lives, breathes. This body is strong. This body is tight. This body is soft. This body is smart. This body is. This body makes sounds. This body holds me. This body keeps me. This body helps me to understand my experience on this earth. This body is the only thing that I own, the only thing I came with, and I will go back with this body. This body, this body is black, this body is brown, this body is pink in some bits, this body is deep. This body was not made for work. This body was made to shirk, so don't let me go berserk. This body laughs. They want to play this body, they want to play this body, they want to play this body, and then they want to play. The body, a real entity that lives, breathes, is strong, is tight, is gentle, is smart, growls, holds me, helps me to understand my existence on this earth. Is the only thing I own, the only thing I came with, and I will go back with this body, 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 the 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 body. Depictions of women's bodies, of the female form, have formed part of many of the most important discourses in Western culture within art history and more widely within visual arts, challenging the male gaze that women's bodies have been subjected to. Claudette Johnson has sought to depict the difference and the divergence of the female form on her own terms, challenging who is depicted and how, as well as who is excluded and why. Johnson has been clear in articulating that she depicts naked women and not nudes, thinking about this in relation to the ideas of nudes as part of the historical subjugation of women's bodies in art history. Rather, Johnson expands understandings of the body and the female form through something we could consider as a radical imagination, where she's challenging figuration and considering how these fields might exist in other ways. And within Johnson's practice, there has been a focus that extends beyond only dreaming of different futures, but instead a consistent working in the present to explore new ways of creating. This could be seen as early as 1982, when Claudette Johnson gave a presentation at the first Black Art Convention, which was the first time Black artists had come together in Wolverhampton to consider and to discuss the form, function and future of Black art. Claudette Johnson was the only woman to speak at the convention and to discuss her practice, articulating her focus on depicting Black women. Talking about that presentation, Johnson has said, I presented a slide lecture about the female figure in my work, and I used examples of Velasquez and Manet to show the difference in how women were positioned in their works, as opposed to how I was positioning them. And to unpack this moment from 1982, I draw on Bell Hooks, who in her essay from 1996, titled Facing the Difference, the Black Female Body, almost seems to be speaking directly to Johnson and what she was articulating during that presentation, this idea of creating a counter-hegemonic artworks that go against the grain. And I'll quote now from Bell Hooks, who says, creating counter-hegemonic images of blackness that resist the stereotypes and challenge the artistic imagination is not a simple task. To begin with, artists have to engage in a process of education that encourages critical consciousness and enables them as individuals to break the hold of colonizing representations. Once that process is completed, then they have a space to map a new terrain, one that can emerge only from an imaginative inventiveness, since there is no body of images, no tradition to draw on. Concurrently, even after the image are in place, the art world may lack a critical language to speak to the complexities that these images evoke. Since images that are counter-hegemonic are necessarily provocative, their seductiveness, their allure, lie in the freshness of insight and vision. They fulfill longings that are oftentimes not yet articulated in words. The longing to look at blackness in ways that resist and goes beyond stereotypes. Despite the tenacity of white supremacy as a worldview that overdetermines the production of images in this society, no power is absolute to the imagination. The practice of freedom in daily life, and that includes artistic freedom, is always a liberatory act that begins with the will to imagine. Here, Hooks is reminding us of what it takes for an artist, a black woman artist, to tap into their radical imagination and to map a new terrain when they have no direct reference point, as was Johnson experienced as an artist and student in Britain in the 80s. Through Johnson's work, she articulates the sense of the world. She has noted that in the early years of her practice, she was unable to find images of black women that she recognized, and this invisibility drove her practice as she felt something new was needed. In 1990, as part of the exhibition catalogue for Johnson's solo show at Rochdale Art Gallery, Johnson said, "I'm not interested in portraiture or its tradition, I'm interested in giving space to black women presence, a presence which has been distorted, hidden and denied." With this statement from 1990 and the presentation at the 1982 conference, we can argue that Johnson's practice begins to resonate with Saidiya Hartman's notions on writing back to historical silences through critical theory and creative writing. Saidiya Hartman, in her book Wayward Lives and Beautiful Experiments, recreates the radical imagination and wayward practices of young black women by describing the world through their eyes. We see Johnson evoking a similar way of working in the way that she has centered the lived experiences of black women in dialogue with key figures in art history. Hartman was thinking about this in relation to resisting gaps in the archive of American history and whose perspective is given importance, whilst for Johnson, art history is the archive. Both Hartman and Johnson utilize the radical imagination to speak back to emissions of black women. Both are crafting these counter-narratives. Both are making contributions to experimental aesthetics and narratives that disrupt and reject essentialized notions of what it means to be black. Coming back to the Black Art Convention talk of '82, Johnson started her presentation by showing images, the audience images of black women by white men, articulating the way they had been presented as sexual with seemingly nothing to offer, just bodies there to be observed, portrayed as passive. She talks about the way she had and was resisting these depictions, instead seeking out alternative images of African women. She shared the development of her practice, discussing the media and techniques utilized. Through the presentation, Johnson addressed and brought forth the notion of what later came to be termed intersectionality, arguing that black women's artists specifically were exploring a different reality in their work, one that was invisible to the mainstream art world. The seminar and presentation have since been heralded as critical and formative moments of the black feminist art movement in the UK. And for a more expansive unpacking of this moment, to see the work of Ella Mills, which is in the I Came to Dance catalogue. At the opening night of Presence, which is Johnson's current show at the Court Hall, Johnson spoke of the discontinuities in art history, discussing how black art has problematically sat outside British art history and how spaces like the Court Hall have now begun the work of interrogating them. If we go back to the 82 talk, Johnson was really articulating this dialogue between Western art history and her work that she was making, and now with the current exhibition, Presence, this conversation continues. As part of this conversation, we can ask ourselves some questions. How, for example, does Johnson's work sit in relation to Paul Gauguin's work, which is literally in the room next door? What questions does it force audiences to ask about the treatment of the female form in Western art? history, particularly the treatment of black and brown bodies and how they have been depicted in paintings such as these in ways that not only reinforce white cultural imperialism, but also romanticize otherness. With her work, Johnson's work at large scale, there is an expectation that the viewer needs to stand back to see the whole work. She defines and shapes a distinct style in relation to visualizing the female form. There's a confidence in the strokes and mark making, the way the forms take up space, whether they are naked or clothed. There's a centering of agency, power and vulnerability of the woman, an unpacking of the layers of the female form, female presence and female identity. Some parts of the work seemingly complete, whereas others appear unfinished. Where traditionally women have been portrayed through the male gaze, Johnson reclaims this gaze in her work. In Teaching to Transgress, Bell Hooks talks about the body and the importance of conversations about the body and how we live in our bodies as critical if we want to challenge the way power has orchestrated itself in institutional spaces. Hooks argues for a return to the body to speak about ourselves as subjects in history, ascertaining that black women need to be in touch with their bodies in a way that is liberatory. The idea of how we live in our bodies and a return to the body is communicated both in Johnson's work and in the poetry of Belinda Zhawi. Zhawi and Johnson remind us that our bodies are real, that they live, that they have a purpose, and part of that purpose is to understand our experience on earth, our existence on earth. They encourage a return to the body. Claudette Johnson, when asked by curator Emma Ridgway about the expansive physical gestures she makes when creating works such as I Came to Dance, discussed her making process and the physicality of that process. For me, for myself, it articulated Johnson's ideas about how she not only uses, but brings her whole body into the work and the creating process. In that conversation with Emma Ridgway, Johnson commented that the medium carries the memory of my mark. It allows me to put my whole body into the work because I'm working larger than life. It means that sometimes I almost fully stretch to reach the top right corner or the bottom left corner. And discussing this same process, writer and curator Jelaine Tawadros has commented, Johnson has to stretch up and across the expanse of the picture plane, elevating and contorting her body to reach the furthest corners of the paper. Her whole body is mobilized in the process of making and creating her monumental figures, demanding of a physical intensity and dynamism of movement that is embodied in the final works. The end result is work that expands and stretches beyond their frames. The bodies are more than take up the space they are given, communicating, in fact, that the space allocated maybe is not enough. There's a sense that the women Johnson's depicting not only take up space, they transform space. They have an undeniable presence which mirrors the whole body process that Johnson uses to create the work in the first place. Through her poem, Belinda Zhawi reminds us of the body's capacity to engage in acts of enjoyment and pleasure. An engagement with the work of Johnson and the female form through sound expands our understanding of the body, what it means, what it does, what it feels, and where it goes. When Zhawi talks about this body wants to play, it is a reminder that in Johnson's work, the body has come to play, has come to dance, to partake in an activity that happens when the body connects with beautiful sounds. When we think about the body that makes sounds, we can relate this to the connection with jazz music. In I Came to Dance, Johnson has noted that the same pattern found in jazz, where the lines break and are rearranged, can be seen in this work. We see the pattern going through the body, creating almost a body that makes sounds. When Zhawi talks about they want to play this body and then they want to play, we can see the contradictions that Johnson was exploring in I Came to Dance, where black bodies are stereotyped when it comes to the act of dancing. There's often an expectation that black bodies should naturally be able to dance. Black bodies should be available to perform in these movements at request. And yet simultaneously our bodies, black bodies, want the freedom to move to sound without stereotypes and the baggage that brings. The idea that Johnson's work exceeds their physical forms comes from analysing the artworks themselves. It is clear that these works do not fit the frame. Instead, they break the borders, they spill out of the frame. Zhawi tells us that this body was not made for work. This body was made to shirk. She tells us that our bodies want pleasure, to enjoy, in fact, to enjoy the moment. The body is not interested in work, in responsibilities. In fact, our bodies are not designed for the stresses that we face today. Some of these ideas, perhaps you could say, could be seen in the work of Johnson, particularly blues dance, giving ourselves over to pleasure and joy through the movement of our bodies. The idea of dancing, sound and movement present in I Came to Dance and blues dance can also be seen in relation to African-American artist Faith Ringgold's work, Dancing at the Louvre. Ringgold is known for combining African-American quilting techniques with painting and text. Dancing at the Louvre is the first in a series of 12 works called The French Connection, telling the fictional story of a young black woman called Willa Marie Simone. Ringgold's work brings to the forefront the ways in which we might engage with art through the body and through movement in the museum and gallery space. Dance, music, sound draw our attention to our emotions and invoke a different perspective. In Ringgold's work, there is a sense of enjoyment here, of taking that space, of allowing the body to want what it wants, even in spaces like museums that have not historically been designed for black bodies. In I Came to Dance, the woman asserts her reason for being in the gallery space. She has come to dance. In blues dance, the woman is dancing at the Courtauld Gallery. There is an interesting space between the two women's experience and us observing them as viewers. It is where I argue Johnson's work exceeds beyond their physical form, because as viewers, we can move beyond what we see and engage with what we feel. Zhawi has said, this body helps me to understand my experience on this earth. The performativity of dance as a response to music produces different forms of knowledge that register in, on, and through the body. Particularly in blues dance, we can allow ourselves to not only see, but feel her movements. We can allow ourselves to hear what she's listening to so intently that she does not even meet our gaze. We can seek to enter her world, inhabit her space with and alongside her. Works like blues dance, where the woman dancing does not meet our gaze, differ from some of Johnson's other works, such as Trilogy. And here I've taken one part of that, which is Trilogy Part 1, Woman in Blue. In this work, the gaze is intense, unavoidable even. However, in blues dance, we see a different agency, one where the woman, to use the words of bell hooks again from Facing Difference, the black female body, the woman in blues dance creates her own gaze in an alternative space where she is both self-defining and self-determining. This notion of creating alternative spaces through the movement and placement of the body is there in Johnson's work, and it also resonates with the work of artist and choreographer Okwi Okpokwasili. Both artists are taking the body as subject matter. Okpokwasili is similarly interested in working with and centering black women. She has stated, I want a liberated space that goes beyond expectations about what my body should be doing. Expectations of a particular beauty or power or invulnerability. We're gonna play a video now of the artist and the work that this work is part of a work called Poor People's TV. Wasili has talked about the body occupying multiple spaces, both in the now and in the past. This relates to work that she has made, such as Bronx Gothic and poor people's artworks that seem to move, poor people's TV artworks that seem to move between time, past and present. Pop Wasili uses her body to claim space, claim autonomy and claim pleasure, a sense of liberation. The importance of the body can be seen in both Johnson and Opok Wasili's practices. For Opok Wasili, the body is both the subject matter and the medium. With Johnson, we see how her own body features in her work through several self-portraits, and also in the way that she's talked about using her whole body to create work. However, both produce transgressive work in relation to understanding the Black female body, which trouble Western art history as they defamiliarize historical perceptions of the Black body that audiences might be used to when they think of the works created by Paul Gauguin or Picasso. Also connecting back to this, the work also connects back to Johnson's focus on the limited stereotypes placed in Black women's bodies as they move through dance. Rather, both Johnson and Opok Wasili provide wide-ranging and nuanced depictions of the Black female form. They allow Black bodies to enact their own forms of pleasure, leisure, storytelling, and dreaming, both grounded in the narratives of the bodies of Black women. In conclusion, we can recognize the body as the key place for knowledge and understanding. In fact, the body contains this. Johnson, with a clear awareness of this, depicts pleasure felt in the body through sound and movement, affirming the right of a Black woman's body to engage in play and joy with an understanding of dancing as embodied knowledge. She gives space, invites even the viewer to engage with art using all the senses. The use of both sensory and formal elements can clearly be seen in Johnson's practice, giving the audience a richer and more rewarding aesthetic experience. The way Johnson engages with the body and sound and movement and how she brings these together, merging them in the work, takes it beyond a purely aesthetic experience, engaging us in the transformative power of art. The outcome for the viewer is an experience that is enjoyable, liberating. As viewers, we must then participate in the process of a slower looking at these works so as to interpret the full meaning of the works, allowing ourselves, our bodies, to be moved and transformed by what we see. These works exceed their physical form. They cannot be contained, the same way that through dance the body cannot be contained. I want to end by coming back to the poem by Belinda Zhawi. This body wants to play, this body wants to play, this body wants sun, this body is real, this body lives, breathes, this body is strong, this body makes sounds, this body holds me, this body keeps me, this body helps me to understand my experience on this earth. This body is the only thing that I own, the only thing I came with, and I will go back with this body. This body is black, this body is brown, this body is pink, and in some bits this body is deep. This body was not made for work, this body was not made to shirk, so don't let me go berserk. This body laughs, they want to play this body. They want to play this body. They want to play this body and then they want to play. The body, a real entity that lives, breathes, is strong, is tight, is gentle, is smart, growls, holds me, helps me to understand my existence on earth, is the only thing I own, the only thing I came with, and I will go back with. This body, this body, this body, this body, this body, this body, the body, the body, the body, the body. This body wants what it wants.